I'm David Spencer. Welcome to Gardening with Bugs. So everybody's keen to invite pollinators to their yard, and that's a wonderful thing. Don't get me wrong, I love it. I just have one little pet peeve, and that is when people have this idea that you're just going to plant a flower and that's going to solve all the problems. You're going to get that biodiversity. It's frustrating for me because that's open-minded enough to understand that the world of bugs and plants is very complicated, and that you need to do one thing in order to have success with another. But it falls short in that just that recognition isn't recognizing that there's plenty more considerations. Even what I'm going to suggest is just a drop in the bucket for all the possibilities out here. So you really have to be open-minded. And so I'm going to give you this one example, a way to enhance the pollination in your yard. If that's what you're concerned about, it's also enhancing the aphid control in my yard. So again, this is not, it's important that you know it because it opens your eyes to a lot of possibilities, but this isn't the be all end all. Like you want to enhance all life in your yard. I promise, even the predators or even the pests. If you promote the pests, it'll attract the predators. And here's a good example. So I'm growing stinging nettle in the bed behind me. It's awful because I have kids and I like to work with my bare hands, and so in this bed I got to wear gloves, and I just hope that the kids don't really notice it. Now, if you're not familiar with stinging nettle, it is a wonderful plant to have, maybe not in your yard, but have access to, because it is delicious and incredibly nutritious. Dried weight, it has more protein than most plant-based materials, if protein's your thing, but it also is just loaded with vitamins. The fact that most large herbivores don't eat it is just because it stings. It's really like, it attracts all sorts of bugs. They'll cycle on it. I've seen ladybugs just go there just to mate. They're not even feeding on anything, it seems. It's really a wonderful benefit to the garden. Now, I'm planting it specifically to allow the hop aphid, which infects hops, cannabis, and stinging nettle, because they're all closely related. I want it to come on stinging nettle. The stinging nettle comes up early. It's March. I'm going to establish the aphids here. I'm going to establish the predators of those aphids here. And then when the hops, which are just coming out of the ground now, leaf out and attract that aphid over, the predators are already in my yard. So it sounds crazy. I don't care if the stinging nettle dies from aphids here. It won't. It's the same thing. It'll just attract a whole bunch of predators. I do want to harvest enough off of it with gloves and then blanched quickly to kill the stinging properties before I eat it or brew a beer with it, which I've done. But here's where it ties into pollination. There's a whole bunch of pollinators, and just to name a few, and again, so like I'm saying, I'm trying to be specific with an example here, but there's like endless possibilities. Like, people forget that mosquitoes are pollinators, and so maybe having a water feature is an important way to get better pollination in your yard. Really, pollination is secondary for them because they're food for so many other things, and that's also important. So the good example I want to use here is like hoverflies and green lacewings are two examples. The ones that you see, they're native. You can buy them, but it's not recommended because, of course, they'll just show up anyways for pollination and aphid control outside. As adults, they will only feed on pollen and nectar, so they are pollinators. In the case of the hoverfly, it's known through some studies in Britain that one of the hoverfly species that goes from Great Britain to the continent is probably responsible for a biomass migration that's equal to that of like the great buffalo migrations, just on the biomass that they're taking across as pollen and as their own weight, feeding a bunch of other predators. And same with the lacewing. They're here, they will find that aphid, they will lay their eggs there, the larva will eat the aphids and pupate right there in the soil or on adjacent plants, and then emerge as new adults to pollinate your yard. So yes, ladybugs are great. Of course, you want butterflies because they're beautiful pollinators, but something like this, it needs more than just flowers. And of course, this is like a fairly advanced topic because, of course, just by not spraying your plants or using chemicals and having a really naturally focused gardening technique, these guys are going to come anyway, so you don't really have to worry about it. But it's important with gardening with bugs to understand that these aphids are just food for a whole bunch of things. I don't want to get rid of them. And in my case, I actually purposely grow specific plants to attract specific types of aphids that won't spread. So for example, around the border here, I have lupins. It's a pea aphid, so it's going to affect some peas, but really it's specific to the lupin. So I'm not too worried about that one transferring over. The other pea aphids aren't usually transferable there, at least not in my yard. Similarly, nasturtiums all grow because it gets that horrible black aphid. Long ago, I stopped growing it on the planter at my front door because it looks horrible and it's covered in aphids, but now I just tuck it behind some other ones. It's a beautiful plant, it's edible, and of course, it's going to attract the predators of that black aphid, and those predators might be generalist of other aphid species as well, and go into my yard and protect my yard from more aphids. So it's important to recognize in your garden that but just inviting pollination is not the be all and end all. You need all things there. Like you'll see, I've also got birdhouses all over the place. That's in theory cutting down on the population of pollinators, but it's all part of the same program here. We're just encouraging life in all forms, and in that abundance and variety, there is a natural balance. It always comes back to this. I think the main principle for me is I'm growing food. If it's flowers or if it's food for myself as well, just plants in general are food. So I have to be aware that something's going to eat it, but I also have to be aware that something's going to eat that. So if I wipe something clean, if I just use a harsh pesticide all over the yard and just like have a clean slate, then I'm producing food. The only thing that's going to come, or the first thing that's going to come, is what eats that. It'll take longer for the predators to come. So and that principle, just it has to be that you're comfortable with the more variety to keep that balance. And that's really the essence here. So yes, grow flowers. I'm not saying don't, but don't just say like grow milkweed, the butterflies will come, problem solved. No, and I'm not saying grow a stinging nettle either. But what I'm trying to say is just be comfortable growing a variety of plants, recognizing there's all sorts of bugs on them, and just be comfortable. The secret to the health of the garden is bugs.